Southeastern wrestling has always had a special place in the hearts of fans who grew up in the territory days, and November 11th, 2008, serves as both a reflection on where the industry stood at the time and a look back at the legends and stories that shaped the sport in the region. The late 2000s were a fascinating period for professional wrestling in the South. While WWE and TNA dominated the mainstream scene, a dedicated fanbase kept the traditions of Southeastern and territorial-style wrestling alive through independent shows, nostalgia events, and online communities. News and updates. In 2008, WWE was pushing stars like John Cena, Triple H, Jeff Hardy, and Chris Jericho. But in the Southeast, the independent scene was thriving in its own way. Promotions in Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida ran weekly or monthly cards featuring a mix of veteran names from the past and hungry up-and-comers eager to make their mark. This period also saw a wave of Legends reunions, as promoters realized there was still a strong demand for appearances from stars who cut their teeth in the Southeastern Championship Wrestling (SECW) days. The independent promotions often leaned heavily on nostalgia, and that formula worked. Drawing crowds in the hundreds rather than thousands, they focused on intimate venues, giving fans close-up access to the action that harkened back to the territory era. Names like Robert Fuller, Jimmy Golden, and even occasional appearances from Bullet Bob Armstrong helped keep the Southeastern wrestling tradition alive. Spotlight on the Armstrong family. Few families have been as influential in Southeastern wrestling as the Armstrongs. By 2008, Bob Armstrong was semi-retired but still appeared at fan conventions and Legends shows. His sons, Brad, Scott, Steve, and Brian, Road Dogg Jesse James, all had varying degrees of activity in the business at the time. Brad Armstrong, known for his technical ability and respected locker room presence, was working backstage with WWE, helping younger talents while occasionally lacing up the boots. Scott Armstrong was making a name as a WWE referee, while Brian was fresh off his WWE run, working the independent circuit. The Armstrong legacy was still very much alive, and their connection to Southeastern Championship Wrestling kept them close to the hearts of longtime fans. Throwback to Southeastern Championship Wrestling. Nostalgia always circles back to the golden years of SECW in the late 1970s and 1980s. November of 2008 marked 30 years since the peak run of stars like Austin Idol, the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller, and the Mongolian Stomper. Fans often recalled the heated feuds that drew sellout crowds in places like Knoxville, Birmingham, and Dothan. SECW's television show was a weekly tradition, blending gritty promos, studio wrestling, and hot angles that made fans believe every rivalry was real. One of the most remembered storylines from the Southeastern days was the feud between Ron Fuller's stud stable and the various babyfaces who stood against them. That legacy carried forward into 2008 nostalgia shows, where fans still chanted for their favorites decades later. The promotion might have been gone, but its spirit remained in the independent promotions that paid homage to its legacy. Notes from the independent circuit. By late 2008, promotions like Georgia Championship Wrestling, revived in independent form, Southern All-Star Wrestling, and others were giving platforms to young stars who would later become more prominent names. Wrestlers like AJ Styles, who had already become a star in TNA, were proof of how the Southeastern independent scene had developed future main eventers. The likes of Chase Stevens, Cassidy Riley, and David Young carried the torch for modern Southeastern-style wrestling, mixing the tradition of the past with the athleticism of the new generation. Nostalgia events and fan conventions. 2008 was also a boom year for wrestling conventions and nostalgia events across the Southeast. Fans could meet their heroes from the past, buy classic memorabilia, and listen to stories from the road. Wrestlers like Jimmy Valiant, Tommy Rich, and Ron Garvin often headlined these fan fests, reconnecting with those who once watched them tear down the house in small-town gyms and civic centers. For many, these conventions provided a bridge between the modern product and the treasured memories of territorial wrestling. Southeastern wrestling's lasting legacy. Even in 2008, long after the national expansion of WWE had changed the wrestling landscape, the Southeastern Territory's influence remained undeniable. The storytelling, character work, and connection to the audience that defined Southeastern wrestling continued to inspire both fans and workers. Promoters leaned into that history, knowing that the nostalgia wasn't just about reliving the past, it was about reminding people why they fell in love with wrestling in the first place. On November 11, 2008, the Southeastern wrestling community wasn't just looking backward, it was also supporting the future. By blending nostalgia with new talent, the region kept alive a style and culture that shaped generations of fans.